Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. The swastika flying over New York City. German soldiers patrolling the streets of Washington, D.C. American newspapers filled with Nazi propaganda. It sounds like the plot of a dystopian novel, but in Hitler's grand vision of world domination, the United States was very much on his mind. While Nazi Germany never invaded American soil, Hitler had plans, both concrete and speculative, for what he wanted to do with the United States if he had managed to win the Second World War. First, we have to understand Hitler's ideology. He believed that history was a struggle for living space, Lebensraum, for the so-called Aryan race. Europe was his immediate battlefield, but in his writings and private conversations, he often hinted at a world divided between great powers. His dream was to see Germany dominate Europe, then extend that dominance across the Atlantic. And make no mistake, Hitler saw America both as a threat and as a prize. In the short term, Nazi strategy toward the United States was surprisingly practical. Hitler did not initially want war with America. He wanted to defeat Britain and the Soviet Union first, and he hoped the U.S. would stay neutral. But once America joined the war in 1941, Hitler declared war almost immediately, sealing the two nations' confrontation. From that moment, his long-term vision for the United States became clear: weaken it, divide it, and ultimately bring it under Nazi control. One of the earliest ideas involved breaking America apart. Hitler and his top planners believed the U.S. was too large and too diverse to stay united under pressure. They imagined that, with Britain destroyed and Germany ruling Europe, America would collapse into regional powers. The South might drift away, the Midwest might turn isolationist, and coastal regions might fall under foreign influence. In this fractured America, Germany could pick allies, set up puppet governments, and gradually extend its grip. But Hitler's ambitions didn't stop with division. He also envisioned direct influence over American life. The Nazi regime studied American society carefully. They admired certain aspects like industrial power and racial segregation, which they saw as compatible with their own ideology. They imagined replacing democracy with authoritarian leadership, infiltrating American culture with fascist ideas, and shaping education to reflect Nazi values. In Hitler's eyes, the United States was both dangerous and useful, a nation whose resources and technology could fuel his empire, once properly controlled. There were even military plans, however far-fetched. German naval strategy included the idea of building long-range bombers, the so-called America bomber, that could strike New York and Washington from Europe. The Luftwaffe experimented with designs for transatlantic aircraft that could terrorize American cities with bombs. While these projects never left the drawing board, they show that Hitler intended, at the very least, to bring war to American soil. The German Navy also dreamed of a new kind of U-boat war. With advanced submarines, they hoped to choke off America's supply lines, starve its coasts, and make the Atlantic an ocean of fear. If Germany had defeated Britain, the U.S. would have been isolated, with Nazi submarines prowling offshore and German bases perhaps even established in Canada or South America. And what of actual occupation? Here the picture becomes darker, but also more speculative. Hitler had no detailed blueprint for ruling America the way he did for Eastern Europe. But we can piece together his intentions from ideology. The Nazis despised American democracy, American diversity, and American culture, which they considered corrupted by immigrants and Jews. If Germany had somehow conquered the U.S., a nearly impossible task, they would likely have installed a puppet regime, dismantled democratic institutions, and unleashed their racial policies on American soil. For millions of Americans, particularly minorities, life under such a regime would have been brutal. Segregation would harden into something far more violent. Freedom of speech, religion, and press would vanish overnight. There's also the question of alliances. Hitler occasionally spoke of a world divided between Germany, Italy, Japan, and perhaps a weakened America. In his dream map, Germany would dominate Europe and Africa, Japan would rule Asia and the Pacific, and the United States, if it survived as an independent entity, would be reduced to a junior partner, confined to the Western Hemisphere and stripped of global power. In this way, Hitler didn't necessarily envision exterminating the U.S., but he wanted it neutralized, broken, and obedient. Consider daily life if this had come true. Imagine American schools teaching Nazi ideology. Imagine the Constitution scrapped, replaced with a Führer-style system of leadership. Imagine newspapers filled with swastikas, Hollywood censored into propaganda, and books by undesirable authors burned in public squares. If you were part of the white majority, you might be told that you were safe as long as you obeyed. But if you were black, Jewish, immigrant, gay, or politically outspoken, your life would be one of fear, persecution, or outright extermination. Of course, reality makes clear that these plans were fantasies. Nazi Germany never had the military reach to invade or occupy America. Even with Britain defeated, the Atlantic was vast, and American industry was far too powerful. Hitler's vision of a Nazi-controlled America was as unrealistic as it was terrifying. But the fact that he dreamed of it at all reveals the scope of his ambition. For Hitler, world domination wasn't just rhetoric, it was the end goal. And in that dream, the United States could never be allowed to remain a free, independent democracy. So what would Hitler's plans for the U.S. have meant? At best, a fractured and diminished America under German influence. At worst, a conquered land stripped of its freedoms, transformed into a tool of the Nazi Empire. Either way, the country we know today, the land of democracy, innovation, and diverse voices, would never have existed. History reminds us that such a future was possible, but only if the Allies had failed. The sacrifices made on battlefields from Normandy to the Pacific, the industrial effort that turned the tide, and the determination of millions ensured that Hitler's vision never crossed the Atlantic. In the end, his plans for America were buried with his defeat in 1945. And that is the chilling answer to the question, what were Hitler's plans for the United States? To break it, to control it, to erase the freedoms that define it. A nightmare narrowly avoided, and one that reminds us how fragile liberty can be when confronted with tyranny.